The crucifixion of Jesus Christ, the most pivotal moment in Christian history, may not have occurred the way you've been taught. And this isn't about minor inconsistencies in the Gospels. This is about a staggering, mind-blowing possibility. What if Jesus was never crucified at all? What if the figure on the cross, beaten, bleeding, and humiliated, was not Jesus, but someone else? This claim isn't new. In fact, it rocked the foundations of early Christianity. One Gnostic sect, the Basilidians, believed Jesus deceived his executioners. According to their lost teachings, it was Simon of Cyrene, who the Gospels say carried the cross, who was crucified in Jesus' place. The Gnostics even asserted that Simon's face was transformed to resemble Jesus, while the real Christ stood nearby, unharmed and amused by their ignorance. Yes, you heard that correctly. According to these Gnostic writings, Jesus didn't suffer or die, because he was never a being of flesh and blood. He was a divine, incorruptible essence. The crucifixion was a mere illusion, a cosmic trick played on those who thought they could kill the unkillable. Before dismissing this as heresy, let's delve into history. The Acts of John, an apocryphal text suppressed by the early church, describes an eerie vision. In it, Jesus appears to his disciple John on the night of the crucifixion, standing unharmed while a spectral image of him endures the suffering on the cross. Jesus tells John, "I am not the one they are crucifying." Another Gnostic text, the second treatise of the Great Seth, discovered in the Nag Hammadi Library in 1945, goes even further. Jesus mocks his executioners, calling them blind fools for thinking they had power over him. Interestingly, Islam shares a similar claim. The Quran states in Surah An-Nisa 4:157 that Jesus was not crucified but that it only appeared so. Could this echo the same hidden knowledge? Now, let's examine the traditional version of the crucifixion. The earliest accounts in the New Testament were written decades after the events and often contradict each other. Mark's Gospel portrays Jesus as abandoned, crying out, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" In contrast, Luke depicts a calm, forgiving Jesus, while John's Gospel shows him in full control, declaring, "It is finished." 3 different accounts. Why? It's all about controlling the narrative. The church needed Jesus to suffer, bleed, and die because a suffering Christ is essential for the redemption story. Without his death, mainstream Christian theology crumbles. So, what really happened on that fateful day in Jerusalem? Did the Romans unknowingly crucify Simon of Cyrene, thinking he was Jesus? Or did the early Christians craft a myth to legitimize their faith? Gnostics believed the material world was a flawed illusion, created by a false god they called the Demiurge, not the true, benevolent deity. They saw the physical world as a trap, designed to keep humanity ignorant and enslaved. Diseases, wars, greed, and suffering weren't the result of divine will. They were the mechanisms of control. In this context, Jesus wasn't a sacrificial lamb who died for humanity's sins, but a spiritual guide trying to awaken people from the illusion of the material world. In the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus speaks not of sin or salvation, but of self-awakening. He says, "The kingdom of God is within you," urging his followers to seek enlightenment from within, not from the external world. This knowledge was dangerous. The authorities couldn't allow it to spread because it threatened the system. Jesus, in Gnostic writings, wasn't teaching submission. He was teaching escape from the prison of flesh and matter. This was why the early church sought to destroy Gnostic texts, and why the Gospel of Thomas and others were hidden away for centuries. These writings revealed a Jesus who challenged the false god of this world and sought to free humanity from the illusion. In the Gospel of Judas, another suppressed text, Jesus tells Judas, "You will exceed all of them, for you will sacrifice the man that clothes me." He's not referring to his soul, but to his body, the physical shell, the illusion. Judas, in this interpretation, was not a traitor but the only disciple who truly understood Jesus' mission. If Jesus wasn't crucified to atone for sin, but to reveal hidden truths, it radically changes our understanding of his purpose. His real message, buried beneath centuries of doctrine, was about awakening to the truth and escaping the false reality designed to enslave humanity. What else has been erased from history? What other truths have been suppressed? In 1945, when the Nag Hammadi Library was unearthed, it exposed long-lost teachings that offered a radically different perspective on Jesus and his mission. The Gnostic texts depict him not as a figure of suffering and submission, but as a revealer of divine knowledge, a teacher who sought to liberate people from the forces that keep them trapped in ignorance. The real question is, are we ready to confront this hidden knowledge? The video you've shared presents a radical reinterpretation of early Christianity, especially in relation to Gnosticism. Gnosticism, which existed alongside early Christianity, offers an alternate spiritual framework that was considered heretical by the early church. In Gnostic thought, the material world is often viewed as a flawed or corrupt creation, and salvation comes through inner knowledge, gnosis, rather than faith or obedience to an external authority. Key points from the text. 1. Gnostic cosmology. Gnostics believed the world was created by a false, lesser deity known as Yaldabaoth, often referred to as the Demiurge, who is arrogant and ignorant of the true God. The material world, including human bodies, was seen as a prison for divine sparks, souls, and the goal was to escape it through knowledge. 2. Jesus as a liberator. Gnostics viewed Jesus not as a sacrificial lamb or a figure of bodily resurrection, but as a being who brought knowledge of humanity's divine origin and the corrupted nature of the material world. His message was meant to awaken people to the truth of their existence beyond flesh and blood. 3. Gnostic texts. The video mentions texts such as the Gospel of Thomas, Gospel of Judas, Gospel of Mary and Apocryphon of John, which offer different narratives than those in the canonical New Testament. In these texts, salvation is seen as a spiritual awakening or transcendence, and Judas is portrayed as helping Jesus escape his material body rather than betraying him. 4. Critique of institutional Christianity. The early church is accused of deliberately rewriting history and suppressing Gnostic teachings to maintain control over people. The institutional narrative of Jesus' bodily resurrection, suffering, and the need for obedience is seen as a way to keep people spiritually blind and bound to the material world. 5. Resurrection as transcendence. Gnostics taught that true resurrection happens while a person is still alive, by transcending the material world and realizing one's divine nature, not by physically rising from the dead. 6. Spiritual liberation. The true Jesus, according to Gnostic interpretation, came to expose the prison of the material world and to show a way to transcend it, which contrasts with the version of Jesus promoted by the Church, which emphasizes suffering, obedience, and waiting for salvation after death. This interpretation challenges traditional Christian doctrines and emphasizes personal spiritual awakening over institutionalized faith. It's a profound and provocative retelling of early Christian history, focusing on the lost or suppressed teachings that advocate spiritual knowledge and liberation.